Story 1. In my 20s, I really got into sailing. Before that, I used to sit on the beach and watch the sailboats go by, thinking how peaceful and relaxing it looked. So I signed up at the local college and learned to sail. I did some competitive racing. I dreamed of racing in the America's Cup, sailing around the world, and living on a sailboat. I even built a wooden sailboat and restored a few. After a number of years, getting caught in some bad storms and getting tired of waiting for perfect weather, then getting all rigged up just in time for the wind to die, I realized the sport is anything but peaceful and relaxing. Now I sit on the beach and watch the sailboats go by and think, poor saps. They could be lying on the beach relaxing, but they are out there yanking on ropes and grinding winches. Story 2. Brewing beer was enjoyable but did not spark a hobbyist passion. Additionally, it contributed to an increase in abdominal fat. Story 3. Safety pins as an accessory. Back in the 1980s, I wore them constantly. On my pants, in a pattern on my shirt, sweater or jacket, on my socks, on my shoes, and even in my ear. Small ones, big ones, diaper pins, giant novelty ones. You name it, I wore it. Then I turned 17 and said, what am I doing? I look back on the pictures and just laugh. Story 4. I cringe thinking about this now, but when I was in elementary school, I wanted to be Mexican so badly. I am Filipino-American. I would watch Telemundo without subtitles, read the Spanish Bible at church during Mass, and even bought a Mexican flag towel. Story 5. Parkour. We were not amazing at it, but my friends and I had a phase where we ran around local parks, climbed walls, vaulted over picnic tables and railings, and jumped off various objects when we were teenagers. Interestingly, we got into it shortly before an episode of The Office premiered, and after that, everyone else in our school became obsessed with it. We felt like we were into it before it was popular. In retrospect, I am glad I did it because it made me physically active and helped me lose a significant amount of weight. However, now that I am in my late 20s, I am terrified to attempt any of those moves again. Story 6. My skateboarding phase from ages 12 to 14. I wore all the clothes, had the look, and could barely do a kickflip. Story 7. Crochet. Tennis. Very hot food. Reading. Growing plants. App-based dating. Rock climbing. About 100 different video games. Now I am on to golf. I think I have undiagnosed attention issues. Story 8. Baking was my hobby last year. I spent a lot of money on baking utensils. The last time I baked bread was months ago. However, this April, cannabis was semi-legalized in my country, so my current hobby is growing cannabis. Another bottomless money pit. In short, last year I was baking. This year I am getting baked. Story 9. Wearing all black, literally from head to toe. I refuse to wear anything else. One time I had to wear something lighter for church, and after that I realized lighter colors are not too bad. Story 10. I used to drive for hours to watch ospreys. I would book a hotel for 2 nights and spend hours watching them. Then I did not. It was a complete fad. Story 11. P90X. Did it, hated every minute, lost a little weight, and will never do that again. Story 12. Remember that one summer about 15 years ago, when everyone wore plaid shorts? That. Story 13. Every hobby I have ever gotten into, I have thousands of dollars worth of magic. The gathering cards, music equipment and instruments, home brewing equipment, beekeeping supplies, and auto detailing equipment and supplies. Story 14. Dubstep. I had to remove all my playlists containing hundreds of hours of music that sounded like blending cartoon animals. Story 15. Wanting to be a doctor, wanting to be an actor, playing a musical instrument. I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, so I suddenly will hyperfixate on things and then kind of stop. Story 16. Designer clothes. I have an incredible wardrobe of Dolce & Gabbana, Prada, Hermes, you name it. I probably spent over $100,000, but now I am a parent and I do not care about designer clothes. I buy dreadful clothes off the tables at Sam's Club and Costco now because comfort matters, and I definitely do not have time to go to the dry cleaners all the time. Story 17. It was archery for me. I got very good at it, but after a nearby facility closed down, I lost the opportunity. Story 18. Politics, honestly. I stayed so stressed out about it for so long, And when I realized that I really made no difference and people are going to be people, my mental health improved. Story 19. During COVID-19, at 51 years old and female, I took up playing Fortnite to keep my youngest child company. I was not very good at first, but perseverance helped me reach a Jedi level of skill. I was performing exceptionally well, but it's not a good look for an older woman, so I have retired from the gaming world, their loss. Story 20. Breakdancing, parachute pants, and Velcro shoes with zippered pockets on the sides. Story 21. Harry Potter. I once had all the family charts of the Weasley, Black Lestrange, Potter, and Gaunt families memorized. Story 22. I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, so every interest I have includes kayaking, building mechanical keyboards, Dungeons and Dragons, various video games, skincare, baking sourdough, having a home coffee bar, having a home bar, pole dancing, playwriting, getting a real estate license, playing the drums, acting, and becoming a sommelier. I am going to get back to it one of these days. Story 23. Marilyn Manson from 1999 to 2001. Looking back at my photos, I am mortified. Story 24. Hong Kong movies. I was obsessed until the early 2000s. My walls were filled with posters, I had hundreds of videos, wrote regularly for a fanzine, and even went to a midnight screening hosted by Maggie Chung. Today, married with 2 teenagers, I have simply fallen out of touch with the scene. Mr. Vampire is still awesome though. Story 25. Snowboarding became too expensive and paintball was the same. Story 26. Home brewing beer involves a lot of cleaning, and this is not the 1980s. There are many great styles available at the store. Story 27. Juggling. I learned just enough at some camp, then practiced until I was pretty good. After that, I started exploring things like contact juggling and devil sticks. I also bought some equipment and practiced a whole bunch for a couple of years. I tried all sorts of juggling and other dexterity-type activities. I even bought a hat and got into hat juggling. But then I just stopped doing it. So it was just my juggling phase in college. Story 28. I went through a phase where I was heavily into digital art. My tablet was always in use, but now I mostly draw on paper. Story 29. I think the only game I have is Magic: The Gathering. I played a lot for about 6 months, but the people I played with moved away. I realized that while I enjoyed playing, I was mostly doing it to spend time with my friends. I sold many of the cards but kept a couple of my commander decks just in case. Story 30. Basically everything. I find something I like, get into it so much I forget a world outside of it exists. And then one day, I just stop and think, wow, that was a fun ride. Then I start again. Story 31. I had a statement necklace phase for a year. All of them were hideous. Story 32. For about 3 years, I was very into Dance Revolution. I could play every song on the hardest difficulty and achieve full combos on all but 2 of them at the time. I would go to the arcade just to play the latest installments. One day I woke up and felt finished with it. Story 33. I used to be extremely susceptible to phases because I was undiagnosed attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. When I got into something, it was all-encompassing. However, many of those phases were true interests. I just made them my entire identity. Now, I am able to enjoy something without reworking my entire life and aesthetic based on whatever I am into. All my phases have revisited me in some way. Story 34. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu stopped due to COVID-19, and I never found the same motivation to grapple with sweaty strangers to return. Story 35. Sharpening kitchen knives by hand. At one point, I could make a kitchen knife sharp as a razor with nothing more than sharpening stones. It was a relaxing activity, but it is a labor-intensive process if you want to sharpen multiple knives in a row. Story 36. I just want to say this. It is completely okay for hobbies to come and go. It is okay to drop hobbies and pick up new ones throughout your life. Story 37. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder individual here. Pretty much everything. If I want to start something, I hyperfocus and buy all the things I need to do it, then do it, eventually get bored, and start the process over with the next thing. Story 38. Digital art. After seeing all this artificial intelligence art come in, I am glad I gave it up years ago. It must be infuriating for people who spent years perfecting their craft to see others write prompts and produce work in seconds. I am looking forward to getting back into art when my children are older, but it will all be traditional, like learning to paint. Story 39. Paganism. I really wanted magic or some kind of spirituality to be real, so I gave it a shot. People who are really into it will insist that magic is real and you only have to witness it. Unfortunately, you can spend as much time and money as you want attempting to cast spells, play with tarot cards, summon spirits, and more, and nothing will happen as long as you are mentally healthy and open to the placebo effect. So take it from me, magic and ghosts are not real. Story 40. Dragons. From 2011 to 2015, I was very interested in dragons. I could identify what region a dragon came from at a glance and knew almost every type of dragon. I had my likes and dislikes and drew dragons nonstop. I disliked wyverns and Chinese dragons but loved Western dragons. I can pinpoint when my focus began to fade. My grandpa made an offhand comment when I showed him my dragon art. "You should draw more people." Poor 16-year-old me took that personally, and since then, I have lost interest in dragons entirely. Story 41. Being a directioner, which means a One Direction fan. Edit. It is insane how I am the only one with this comment. I thought we were dominating the world at some point. Story 42. Cigars. Now I have thousands of dollars worth of cigars, and I have not smoked one in years. Story 43. 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s rock bands. I used to drive my parents mad talking about them all the time, and I was one of those insert band name here saved my life types. I used to love them, but unfortunately it has come to light that so many of the musicians were pedophiles and sex offenders that I just cannot enjoy the music anymore. Story 44. I made pour-over coffee and espresso shots for a few years. However, I am too tired for that in the morning now, so I use the Keurig machine at work. Story 45. I was into Pokemon big time from the ages of 5 to 25. After that, it sort of waned. 5 years later, it is not that I dislike it, but it is just kind of meh to me now. Story 46. Dark tortured poet phase. I turned all my trauma into Edgar Allan Poe-esque poems and thought they were so deep and profound. It was a good release for all the anger and rage I felt because I was denied therapy sessions. Man, was I one dark teen. Story 47. Those Beanie Babies that ended up not being worth anything. Story 48. Every interest I pursue, I don't entirely let go because I'm convinced I'll return to it. If I had a better memory, I could probably earn degrees in some of the subjects I've explored considering the research and reading I do. I have a craft room overflowing with vinyl machine supplies, yarn, crochet hooks, resin materials, jewelry making tools, calligraphy and brush lettering books and supplies, acrylic paint, watercolors, drawing pencils, diamond art, furniture refinishing materials, woodworking and paper art tools, a sewing machine, a 3D printer, puzzles, board games, and fabric. I am also involved in running, paddle boarding, swimming, yoga, calisthenics, nutrition, certain medical topics, dog training, decorating, home organization, design, gardening, succulents, and kitchen gadgets such as food dehydration, making healthy ice cream, and specialty honey for tea. I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, but I believe it makes me interesting. Story 49. Gaming, I don't know if it counts, but I really want to get back into it. It just seems like too much effort, and I feel like it would take up too much time. I sold my last console 4 years ago, and I've been fine until now, so I'm not really in a rush to get back into it. Story 50. Home brewing. I made hundreds of batches, then one day said, "That's enough." I realized that it had quite become a work rather than a fun activity. Story 51. Playing guitar. I really wanted to be able to do it, but I put in a very small amount of practice and never improved. I did pose a lot in front of the mirror with my guitar, though, so there's that. Story 52. Traveling. I have been to almost 60 countries and always thought my desire to travel would stay with me forever. But after seeing all the places on my bucket list, it became very difficult to be impressed by a new place or country. Eventually, I settled down and now go abroad just for vacation and relaxation, not building my life around traveling. Story 53. Keep it simple, stupid. Preteen me couldn't get enough of them. Now I can't sit through even one of their songs. Story 54. Not me, but I have an interesting story about one of my cousins by marriage. I'll call her Mindy. In middle school and high school, she graduated high school in 2022. Mindy got very into the whole, maybe I'm transgender thing. This is not a criticism of transgender people at all, just a fact that a lot of young kids explore concepts like that as a trend. First, Mindy said she was non-binary, which my husband, her blood cousin, and I fully respected, and we used they/them pronouns for her. She now goes by she/her. Then, she changed her name, not legally but on social media and elsewhere, from Mindy to Carter. Again, we respected this. Most of my husband's family did not, as this is not something that is really recognized in their culture. Then, in mid-high school, Carter/Mindy told us that they were actually a transgender man. Now, this is the part where I am happy that my husband's family drew a line. Carter was asking one of their aunts to approve him getting hormone replacement therapy. She said absolutely not. She loved Carter no matter what and said that if he wanted to do that when he was a legal adult, he could, but she would not approve it. For a couple of years, Carter lived telling people he was a transgender man and tried to pass as a boy in public, which was not difficult since Carter is an androgynous-looking person anyway. My husband and I always called him Carter and used he/him pronouns, though we also told him that their aunt was right to not approve hormones and that he needed to wait until he was an adult and knew it was truly what he wanted. Then, around the time he turned 18 and got his first boyfriend, Carter just stopped the whole thing. First, they mentioned in front of us that their boyfriend called Carter his girlfriend. I asked if the boyfriend did not know about Carter being transgender. Carter said, "Oh, I'm actually non-binary like I said initially, but no one respects that, so I said I was a transgender man so people would at least use the right pronouns." I was confused, but okay, whatever. So we went back to calling Carter they/them. A year later, Carter and the first boyfriend broke up, and she got another boyfriend that she married after just a couple of months. In those months between boyfriends, she completely went back to identifying as a woman and using she/her pronouns. Oddly, she hasn't changed her name back, though it was never legally anything other than Mindy. It's funny to me because Carter has never really addressed the whole gender thing. It was just a phase she went through and then dropped. I think kids should be able to experiment with their identity like that. People calling Carter by the name and pronouns she chose helped a lot in her begrudgingly accepting not getting on hormones. If no one had taken her seriously at all, I think she would have found a way to get on hormones to force people to accept her new identity. Having friends and some family like her mom, my husband, and I respect what she asked for without letting her make irreversible changes to her body that was not even close to being fully developed was the best thing for her, in my opinion. Story 55. Conspiracy theories. September 11th, truther to be exact. I realize now it was a time in my life of little control, and this gave me a sense of knowing and superiority. Story 56. I used to be obsessed with building intricate Lego sets. I had shelves full, but now I rarely touch them. Story 57. Playing sports, I was a really good athlete in high school and college. I broke records and had several most valuable player awards in high school. I continued in college. I played volleyball, basketball, softball, and threw shot put, discus, and javelin. I worked out all the time, lifting weights and doing drills. After I graduated and got a decent job, I eventually realized that my interest in sports was driven by my father. I was much more interested in art and music. I learned to draw, paint, sketch, and play the guitar. I have learned to sew and do many other artistic activities. I did not care much about sports. Story 58. After my dog died, I guess I needed a distraction and got really into perfume. It was random, but it was the first thing my brain found to latch onto. I spent all day, every day browsing perfume websites, reading about the notes in the perfumes, watching people's reviews, deciding which ones I would like, ordering samples, and trying to find good deals. I ended up spending at least $600 in 2 months on perfume. Then, out of nowhere, I completely lost interest. Story 59. Liking Hello Kitty at a grown age has been a part of my childhood, but I became pretty obsessed with it as I got older to the point where it became toxic. Not only did I not want anyone touching anything Hello Kitty or Sanrio that I own, but I would also freak out whenever that happened. Besides, my ex was following OnlyFans girls who would post not safe for work content next to Sanrio plushies and wear Sanrio clothing. That was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. Story 60. Long hair. Around the pandemic, I decided to grow my hair out just to see if I could pull off a ponytail. I grew it out for over a year and found out the hard way that my hair is so thick and curly that the ponytail just curls up into a pseudo-bun. The maintenance was a nightmare. I do not know how other people can tolerate it. Story 61. I really got into leather craft 2 years ago. One can only make so many wallets, mug sleeves, and sunglass holders before it becomes boring. I looked for classes but found none. I searched for someone who does leather work, even a cobbler or saddler, but the only one nearby was not looking to mentor. The only cobbler closed during COVID-19 and stayed closed. I would jump right back in if I could. Until then, it was a phase. Story 62. I collected paper clips in various colors and sizes. I had enough to basically make curtains for my bedroom as a 12-year-old. Story 63. Video gaming feels harder to get into as I get older. It just feels like work. Story 64. I had a phase where I thought I was a legitimate good screamer. I would play music from my iPod dock and grab a microphone that was not hooked up to anything and record covers on my phone. Then I posted them to Facebook. Usually met with a couple of likes and the occasional request or the classic, "You have some potential." They pop up in my memories from time to time, and I cannot help but watch them. It is painfully bad. It is so cringeworthy to look back on, but I have to rewatch them. These all took place anywhere from 2012 to about 2016, when I was ages 18 to 22. I am a full-grown 30 now and fully admit I was always terrible. But I regret nothing. Story 65. Cocaine. I used to use it frequently for 1 year and it was great. However, I was spiraling out of control, so I stopped and have not used it in 7 years. Story 66. Buddhism teaches valuable lessons on introspection, but I do not want to associate myself with religions, cults, or whatever term you prefer, simply because I do not agree with all of it. It is a good source of knowledge, though. Story 67. Brewing beer. I decided it was too much effort and took too long to wait for the level of interest I had. Now I do it less often and enjoy it more. Story 68. I got into skydiving during COVID-19 because you couldn't do anything else. You had to wear a mask on the small airplane until they opened the door and gave you the green light. Then you would stand up, stuff your mask down your shirt, get to the door, rock forward, rock backward, forward again, and jump. It was quite expensive, and I always thought it was strange that you had to wear a mask until you jumped out of an airplane piloted by a guy wearing board shorts and a cut-off t-shirt. Great pilots, though. The community as a whole is some of the best people I've met in my life. Good experience overall. It just wasn't my preference once breweries and trails started opening back up. Story 69. Before, I used to think that women were supposed to be subservient to men. I was taught this by my parents and society. I thought that meant I was submissive, but I am not. The reason I was never happy in my life before I was 40 is because I am not meant to follow orders. I do much better giving orders. Story 70. No offense to anyone here, but I had a religious phase. I was all in until I was not. Story 71. I sometimes go through phases where I focus on home office supplies, specifically post-it notes. Post-it notes, post-it tabs, post-it pens. I go through my inventory and enjoy pondering the possibilities of using the supplies. That is really how I fall in love with collecting things. I convince myself that I am the person who always needs post-it notes. Story 72. During the COVID-19 pandemic, I became very interested in embroidery. I even opened an embroidery shop on Etsy and was featured on BuzzFeed. Over the course of a year, I received many orders. One day, I decided to stop. I closed the shop, refunded my open orders, and have not done embroidery since. Story 73. I used to be really interested in astronomy and stargazing. My telescope was always set up, but now I rarely look up. Story 74. I used to write poetry all the time, but I think it was just because I was depressed. I had a whole book mapped out and everything. Now I can't write at all. Story 75. Target shooting. I have spent thousands of dollars on guns and gear. I even competed in international practical shooting confederation competitions. I have not been shooting in years. Story 76. Magic tricks. Honestly, I loved it and learned several tricks well enough to really baffle people. I even got my mom to scream in surprise at a very Christian restaurant once. I quit doing it after receiving constant criticism. Story 77. Raving. From about age 17, I went raving weekly and thought it was really a way of life. A few years ago, it seemed like everybody was getting younger and the same things were happening at every party. So I decided to stop raving when I turned 50. I can say it is really nice to do something different on a Sunday instead of staying in bed and on the couch all day. Story 78. The army was very enthusiastic at first, but now, after 3 years, I want to leave. Story 79. I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. We would be here all day if I named all my long-forgotten hobbies and projects. Story 80. I got really into pickling during the pandemic. I still do it for the holidays and Father's Day, but not as much as before. Story 81. Pogs in the 1990s were small cardboard circles with cool pictures on them and metal pieces called slammers. You were supposed to flip the pogs with the slammers and trade them. Story 82. I played golf for about 2 years. Then I realized I never actually had fun playing. Story 83. I have the character flaw of getting deeply involved in something, somewhat mastering it or getting close to that, then losing all interest and moving on to something else, repeating the process. Story 84. I was very into climbing for about 4 to 5 years. Then my gym closed, and my replacement gym closed as well. My friends I climbed with and I got very busy with life, and it just fell by the wayside. I have not climbed in 8 months and have no idea if I will anytime soon. Story 85. In-game purchases in gacha gaming are common. I play Genshin Impact, and in my earlier days I spent a percentage of my salary to buy Primogems. I got my favorite characters, but the happiness only lasted 5 seconds after seeing the character on my screen. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.